There was a scene in Mission Impossible 3, the Tom Cruise movie, where he's running through Shanghai. And it just seems like a regular scene. Tom Cruise runs a lot. It's what he does in movies. But they said that he was running past neighborhoods where there were clothes on the clotheslines outside, which you think of as maybe a lower middle class. Maybe they don't have, you know, clothes dryers, that kind of a thing.
What the hell are you doing in Shanghai?
And they wanted to remove that because it would be seen as a sign of weakness that the Shanghai neighborhood didn't have the economic strength to have people who needed that kind of a clothes drying situation. So it was removed. And again, this is a very, very minor point, but that's how specific the Hollywood industry was when it came to placating Chinese audiences. Another example is, of course, the biggest one. They made a remake of Red Dawn, which was the 1980s hit. It was about an invading force led by the Soviet Union. It was very, timely because of the Cold War going on. But they remade it, but they made China as the invading force.
We'll bring terrorists to justice.
And between the time they originated that and thought of that, to the time it was getting closer to release, they thought, oh my gosh, the Chinese marketplace is blowing up. We can't have China as the villain. So what they did was they changed it. They digitally changed the Chinese uniforms, the flags, anything that represented China became North Korea, which was a more palatable enemy.
And then this relationship became really perverse with the live-action remake of Mulan, which made the Uyghur really the villains. So you have CCP propaganda in partnership with Disney.
What could be so more American than Walt Disney, apple pie, and baseball? And now it's being co-opted by the Chinese Communist Party, and you can see that through the credits in thanking basically the CCP. When you're saying all these different entities, you're thanking the CCP.
Our culture, our way of life is being censored by the Chinese Communist Party. Our major industry is self-censoring their scripts and outright kowtowing to the Chinese regime because they want to make money in China.
I have a film that I've been shopping that's about to get produced. Hopefully I'm going to be directing this year. So I was pitching the movie right before COVID happened to a company who was very interested in the script. And we're just sitting around talking about, could we get Mel Gibson for this? Could we get Jeff Bridges for this? How would that work? Is that enough box office? Whatever. And then right at the end of the conversation, the two men that I was talking to, they said, well, we get a lot of our money out of China. Is there any way you could make this movie a little bit more attractive to the Chinese? And I was like, well, I don't know, what would that look like? How could I make it more attractive to the Chinese? He said, well, it's all about terrorists infiltrating the border. Is there any way we could make the terrorists Japanese? Because the Chinese really hate the Japanese. I started laughing. I thought he was kidding because this was just like, this is a joke, right? But no, they were totally serious. And so we thought about it for a second, but it was like, this is insane. No, I can't make the terrorists Japanese. So that kind of deal sort of fell apart.
It's just known in the industry, it's kind of like a silent rule, that if you say something against the regime, you will lose the opportunity to get your film into China for distribution, and you will lose the opportunity to get certain grants. Government grants will not support. A lot of independent funders will not support because they have business dealings with China. The CCP has such a strong hold over the entertainment industry.
And what's the fallout of all of that on our society and culture?
Well, the fallout on this is what happens with the perception that people have. That people look at this as being normalized and that they accept what China is saying.
How often do you see a story where China is the bad guy? You don't. Our media environment has caused just the whole perception of China, the reality, to be distorted.
People have been brainwashed, without knowing it.
How did Hollywood get so involved? Because it seems in many other countries they see Hollywood as the bastions of American democracy. How did Hollywood as an institution get so infiltrated?
Money. Money. China bought its way into Hollywood. It's not... Things don't just happen by accident, especially when you're talking about an ideology that's so insidious. They said, oh, Hollywood, listen, if you want to produce that movie, that's fine. But if you want to bring it to China, which is, you know, a multi-billion-dollar proposition, then you will abide by our rules.
China owns pretty much most of the movie theater chains now here in America. China said, you can't have that in there. And Hollywood listened, and they paid attention. The whole thing about China, the huge market that's there, the influence that they have, they bend over backwards to appease them. They're buying up not just America, they're buying up the world right now.
So let's talk about how that played out in terms of Iron Man 3 then, because it's like, you know, a superhero movie, Marvel, there's a lot banking on it, you know, people look up to these characters. How was the China elements added in?
We got involved with Marvel because Marvel had not been able to get into that market in a big way. They came to us and said, hey, if you can figure out how to apply what you did with Looper at a $35 million budget, what could you do with a $200 million budget movie called Iron Man 3? And if you could do it, we want to do it because that is how we're going to get access to the market in a big way, in a bigger way than just the movie itself. We'll get access for our consumer products, we'll set up theme park rides and all that other kind of stuff. So that's how it came together. So Marvel is very secretive about any of their scripts. So we had to go to Marvel Studios and actually read the script in a 90-minute period. And during that, take notes and figure out, okay, well, if there's this going on, where could we put some China stuff? And we would come up with a bunch of sort of haphazard ideas. And that's where this character Yinsen comes into play with a Chinese scientist named Dr. Wu.
I'd like to introduce you to our guest, Dr. Wu. Oh, this guy. Mr. Stock. Hey. 你好.
For China, they love technology and they love medicine, they love healthcare, they love being the innovators and the world leaders of it. So we knew there was a real opportunity to introduce a character into the Marvel universe that's Chinese, but it's an essential part of the story. It's part of the story that allows the main character to survive and the main character to live on past Iron Man 3. And that character is Dr. Wu. Dr. Wu is going to be advanced beyond any doctor, any technology, biological engineering type of person with discipline anywhere in the world. And that's how we got that narrative passed by the Chinese government, because they were like thumping their chests. They're like, oh, this movie is going to be shot partially in China. It's going to have a Chinese actor, but on top of it, it's going to showcase our technology advancement as a country overall. When we were shooting Iron Man 3, it was December, it was probably 20 degrees, it was cold, it was drizzling. As one of my colleagues said, it felt like we were shooting Gorky Park in Beijing. You know, when you're going through that, it's like a battle-tested relationship. The way they look at what we're creating as far as culture is concerned and seeing how it touches them emotionally and how they want it to touch consumers emotionally. So in a way, you sort of feel this camaraderie that occurs where it's like, hey, we're in the trenches together and we're both trying to achieve the same common goal. The center of the universe in the eyes of the Chinese government, it's Beijing. And then if you think about how Beijing is constructed, you have the ring roads, right? You have the 5th ring, the 4th ring, the 3rd ring, the 2nd ring. Well, the 1st ring road is what? It's around the Forbidden City. That is the center, that's the heart of not only Beijing, but the heart of China. So we wanted to have the premiere there.
首次标注中国制造
We had to create all this hype and publicity around him, and then on top of it, for the show that we did that was televised, we had to actually create a show that was almost like a variety show around Robert Downey Jr. And to get the eyeballs watching him, we had to cast that show with all the biggest actors in China.
国际电影节4月20日，北京卫视大戏看北京。
Robert Downey Jr., he was the first movie star to really come over there and promote a film. And he was always intrigued by the East anyway. He's always been a studier of martial arts. You really want people to feel like this is a goal of yours, is to come over and really understand China and be a part of it. So he came over and we scripted pretty much everything that he said, at least on the onset of when he talked about, like, you know, China, I'm here, I want to be here, I've always loved this culture, I've always loved the people, I love the system of government you're under. This is where I want to be. Thank you for inviting me. I'm so proud to be here. That kind of stuff.
People who know me back in America know that I'm very interested in all things Chinese. I live a fairly Chinese life in America.
Well, Robert Downey Jr. is a professional in every way, so he knew the game that had to be played. He even ate, I'm forgetting the name of those like terribly bitter fruit with the sauce on it, like the big stick that he ate.
加长版的冰糖葫芦一端上来，食指大动的钢铁侠立刻如获至宝。
怎么样，味道？这是糖化，好吃吗？这个。你这是他 lunch， 好吃，非常好吃。
He would do all kinds of different stuff that culturally was relevant to China. He would say everything that we would want him to say. He would shake the hands of every Chinese government official that was there. By the way, we had Chinese government officials on all our sets too that were, you know, overseeing what was going on. It was a pretty intense situation because there was so much of a microscope put on this movie, like these two superpowers getting together to make the biggest movie of the year for Hollywood. It was there was actually almost too much attention put on it, and every step of the way we just sat there going, God, I hope we don't fail at this.
是春晚的小童星王一鸣，能够和好莱坞巨星亲密接触，小家伙也是乐得合不拢嘴。
I guess that's like the editing process too. You cut out so much stuff.
Right.
The audience only sees what you want them to see.
It's a lot of power.
It is. It is. It's a very powerful medium. And I think more filmmakers need to be taught that in schools, the power that they wield. Myself entering the industry as a small independent filmmaker, I had friends in Hollywood who said, don't do it. This will kill your career. You won't get funding. You won't get the top producers that you need to work with. You will have many people say they won't work with you because you've said something to offend the Chinese regime. They didn't realize I was going to go to the extent that I was going to of absolutely sort of blowing up these stories. But they're afraid of even mentioning one line that could offend the Chinese regime and being cancelled. The first long-form movie documentary that I made was Hard to Believe, and it was about the killing of prisoners of conscience for the sale of their organs in China.
It's this huge population, extremely vulnerable. Family didn't know where they were, jailers didn't know who they were, and they became this just vast sea of expendable humanity.
It's an absolutely horrific crime. I cannot think of really much a worse crime than that. At the time, this was 2015, I just thought, this isn't being covered. What more important topic could there be? We've had pushback at every step of the way of distribution. It's been extremely difficult for every movie. I've had colleges call me and cancel screenings, and they've actually said on the phone, one even in writing, said, "I'm sorry, we have to cancel this screening because we have too many students from China on our campus, and we are worried that we will lose funding from China." They say China, but really it means they're losing funding from the Chinese Communist Party. For every college that told me the truth about why they cancelled our movie screening, I believe there was probably 10 more that didn't tell me the truth.
Black Adam that just came out in theaters now can't play in China just because of one line that mentions Dalai Lama, right? So given that just like one line that appears in movies, what is China so afraid of?
But that's $1 million question. I mean, you've got a powerful nation. Their place on the world stage goes without saying. Why would you be afraid of this one little line, of this one little moment? It's very interesting. It just shows you the level of control that the Chinese officials have on pop culture. They clearly think it matters, and to some extent they're right.
We had a huge disagreement with the studio here in the US and what the Chinese government wanted, which was Summer Ching in prominence in that poster around the world. Why? Because China was not just emphasizing this idea that they wanted to portray a certain narrative to their 1.4 billion people. They wanted that narrative portrayed to the rest of the world. And that's where a lot of the problems lie with all this stuff, which is their censorship is not just about their own market. Their censorship and their push for propaganda goes beyond their borders.
They looked at, well, it's kind of hard to get American culture and population under your thumb and influence. But if we just capture a few elites in a few areas, if they can force Hollywood to self-censor, then it'll affect the entertainment industry across the United States and around the world in ways that China never otherwise would be able to get away with.
There's the people at the top who have said, we want distribution access to China, but the CCP is saying, we want indoctrination access to America. And that's the payout. They could basically take over America without firing a shot because they control access to our minds.
They have this ability now to decide what we get to see and not see, so they can promote what makes sense to them and potentially, sway elections just through that mechanism.
When you were working on productions in China, did you ever think about the human rights abuses happening there? Or was that, as China likes to say, their internal problems and didn't cross your mind? Did you ever have to wrestle with that?
That's a great question. I never thought of human rights issues in China before my punch in the nose. Never did. I mean, I saw things with, the village I was a part of that I felt was something that wasn't right in the U.S. I mean, I remember even at our company, people that were working way too long of hours, way too hard, probably weren't compensated well, and were sleeping in stairwells. I think that was stuff that I just sort of brushed aside as just like, oh, well, that's a different culture. That's the way it works. I believe that most of us, a large majority of us, got involved with China because of the opportunities like we talked about, and the fact that those opportunities also had a bigger calling, which was creating sort of this dynamic between the US and China that was going to allow us to spread the aspirational quality of democracy into a communist country, maybe someday changing them over to a democracy like ours. But over time, all of us have been punched in the nose.
Now, when it comes to understanding human rights in China, there's probably no better person than Chen Guangcheng.
A blind activist in China makes a daring escape. Chen Guangcheng, a self-taught lawyer and advocate for the poor, had been a prisoner in his own home for more than 18 months. During that time, he and his wife were periodically and savagely beaten by their Chinese guards.
Diplomatic standoff between the United States and China is finally coming to an end. At the center of it is the Chinese human rights dissident Chen Guangqing. He escaped from house arrest 2 weeks ago, was rescued by U.S. diplomats.
When we got the word that he was in Beijing wanting to talk to us in the wee hours of the morning, we went out and contacted him, and then we engineered almost a maneuver out of Mission Impossible to bring him in to the embassy.
What's interesting is that he had his own unique experience with the Hollywood industry that was making headlines while he was still under house arrest inside China.
很多国内外的网友，在开始了解到中共对我们的这样的对待，他们开始很难相信。后来就越来越多的网友就旅游到山东东石谷去看。 结果就被中共对他们进行殴打呀、抢劫呀。每个人去了东石谷以后回来就把这消息就写在网上，越来越多人就去，那这个消息也就被国际媒体报道。
America will continue to speak out and to press China when lawyers and legal advocates are sent to prison simply for representing clients who challenge the government's positions. And when some, like Chen Guangcheng, are persecuted even after they are released.
后来呢，这个蝙蝠侠，这个 Christian Bale 知道以后呢，他也完全没办法忍受。他后来就联系 CNN 的记者，在中国做完工作以后呢，就跟他们一起驾车去东石谷，试图去看我。当然，他自己呢，也就是说也没能进到我们村子去。 被这个外围的看守拦下来，而且呢，推搡，要他们离开。
Why can I not go visit this man?
Hollywood actor Christian Bale made an 8-hour car journey from Beijing to try to meet a personal hero, the blind, self-taught lawyer Chen Guangcheng.
You know, I'm not being brave doing this.
后来共产党北京知道他去看我这件事情以后呢，被。 当媒体爆出来以后，北京当然很不高兴，就通过中宣部下令封杀他的在中国的电影。他一直对于人权也是非常关注。比如说我来到美国以后呢，这个在我颁奖典礼上，这个蝙蝠侠替我阅读，因为我当时真的是泣不成声啊。
It's my great honor to present Chen Guangcheng with his Human Rights Award. Ladies and gentlemen. Chen Guangcheng.
我自己当然也有这样的经历。我刚来到美国的时候，实际上就有这个好莱坞的导演想要联系我，把我的故事拍成一部电影。那么后来呢，由于中共的干涉，就没有办法这个进行。那也就是在这个过程中，我就深深地了解到了中共对于美国、对于好莱坞这样有影响力的机构，他是多么的关注，他是花了多大的代价，投入了多少人、钱来影响他们。
Hollywood is craven to the Chinese Communist Party. They are on their knees so that they can sell more movies and have more money from being on good terms with the Chinese Communist Party.